Hello. Oh, we're going to be talking to Mavin Khoo, a Bharatanatyam dancer, on a very interesting idea on to perform or to be, negotiating the state. Hi, Divya. Hello, all. I'm just waiting for Mavin to join. Oh, there he is. Let me send him an. Hi, Karina. Hi, Mavin.
Hello, hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
I'm very excited about this interview, I have to say.
So am I. From
I,
the morning, I've been performing, being. I've just been constantly thinking about these two ideas. Thank you so much for being a part of,
my
you know.
absolute pleasure. I've become quite a fan of yours.
Oh my God, oh my God. I better like live up to that.
Oh, I'm
Thank
sure.
you. Bevin, am I audible?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, lovely. I'm just going to turn off comments
Right,
just for a little bit.
sure.
Um, Okay, so I'm just going to set the context for this interview, Maven, before
Yeah,
I formally introduce you to people who've tuned in.
sure.
This idea, this beautiful idea, was actually honestly suggested by you, and thank you for that because it truly made me really think about it. And this morning, as I was gearing up for this interview and putting down my questions,
Yeah.
I thought about these two words, Maven, a lot
Mm,
about performing
mm,
and being.
mm.
And even though we're not really going to be discussing this idea only in the context of the lockdown, but eventually we will also touch upon that,
Yeah,
I also thought about how in this very sort of clutter-filled, chaotic world that we live in, performing is unfortunately sort of associated with a quality of being productive.
hmm,
And somehow being is associated with, in a sense, not being seen,
yeah,
right? And I thought about how sometimes those that perform honestly really wish that they could just be,
mm,
and those that are in a state of being are perhaps coping with emotions, insecurities, angst about perhaps missing out on what is so-called performing bus, so to speak.
hmm,
Right. But I also thought about how a performer is perfectly capable of being while in the act of performing itself, and how somebody who is actually in a state of being is also performing, even
yeah,
though to her or his own voice, and feeling the exact same rush that comes from being under the arc lights. So there is black and there is white, and there is a lot of gray in between. Right?
absolutely.
And how does an artist really negotiate the state, which is what we're really going to be talking
Yeah,
about, and arrive at, in a sense, a state of clarity? And honestly, I thought about, is that clarity even really important?
mm,
Can't we, in a certain way, remain in that state of gray and
mm,
still be alive to our body, to the music, and to the very dynamic tradition of this beautiful dance form called Bharatanatyam? So thank you for allowing me this opportunity to think. And I'm sure that a lot of people have very interesting questions about these ideas as well.
yeah,
So for those who don't know, most people here already know you, but allow me just a minute to introduce Mavin Khoo to you. Mavin Khoo is internationally recognized as a dance artist, teacher, choreographer, and artist scholar. His initial training was at Temple of Fine Arts, Sutra Dance Theatre, and the Ballet School in Malaysia. He pursued his training in Bharatanatyam intensely under the legendary maestro Padma Shri Adyar K. Lakshman, and has also studied the Cunningham technique and classical ballet. As a contemporary dance artist, he has worked with Akram Khan, Shobhana Jai Singh, just to name a few. Khoo is considered one of the few Bharatanatyam male soloists to have carved a niche for himself as an international touring solo artist, while still regularly dancing at major venues like the Music Academy and the Kalakshetra in Chennai. His own company, Mavin Khoo Dance, was founded in 2010 2003, and his productions include Parallel Passions, Devi, The Female Principal, Strictly Bharatanatyam. I'm just going to name a few. Khoo also holds a master's degree in choreography from Middlesex University, and he continues to act as rehearsal director to the Akram Khan Dance Company. Thank you, Mavin.
My absolute pleasure. And I think,
Okay.
Akhila,
So,
you really mentioned so many things that I mean, I could listen to you for the whole day, actually. That was so beautiful in kind of resonating with so many ideas and so many thoughts. And I think, when we were discussing just via WhatsApp, and I said, oh, it'd be really wonderful to talk about this negotiation of being and performing.
yeah,
It's also because, of course, I'm in a particular place as an artist where that is very much the fiber of how my search is directed. And also, the lockdown has been specific because it has given me the time to coach a lot, which usually I don't have the time because I tour so much. So this
yeah,
has been so much the kind of anchor by which I've been coaching dancers, and I'm very fortunate I'm very fortunate to be able to work with a wonderful group of young performers. They're not just students; they're really performers that range, from Ranjit and Vichna to a dancer student who is just about to perform. And the beauty of it is really being able to share the space that I am in now with them.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
think when it comes to this idea of, I mean, there are two elements, right? When we talk about performing and being, there's the physical element of it, which
right,
is about space, and this lockdown really has been challenging that
right,
a lot.
about, yeah,
And there is the internal premise
yeah,
of it,
being, right, yeah,
of
yeah,
being as well.
yeah,
So if I break it down, and let me touch on the lockdown first and foremost, it was a fascinating process for me because I had an identity crisis. Totally.
really,
Yeah,
oh,
totally. Many people don't realize, but in London, it's great to live in London. But if you are a person like me who loves to live in the city, which means I'm out all the time, my social
yeah,
life is a very important dynamic of my life. You're quite happy to live in a very small room, really.
yeah,
So I was
yeah,
living my living space, although it was in one of the coolest parts in London, really was
right,
just a bedroom. So I
oh,
spent a good 2.5 months only in
just,
my bedroom,
oh,
right? I didn't
wow,
even have a living area. In fact, I actually moved accommodation so that I could have a bigger space where I could train.
right,
And it was the first time that I could not dance at all because I literally didn't have the space to
yeah,
dance.
wow,
And not being in the familiar surrounding of theaters, which has become my life,
yeah,
it
life,
was,
yeah,
and not being able to dance, so that was a very, very complex space. And it was so important for me because I was online a lot through Akram's
yeah,
company. I
that's right,
felt, and Akram felt, it was so important for us to be able to be honest about the fact that I was struggling as much as anyone else.
yeah,
I was,
yeah,
and I was not in a
yeah,
position
I can
to
imagine,
kind of be, kind of moralistic and righteous about it and say, oh no, this is a wonderful time for you to reflect and all, because I wasn't. And it was
yeah,
important for me to
yeah,
be honest with it. And in fact, I have to admit, slightly disappointed with some of my peers and some of the senior dancers in India who were kind of very judgmental, I will say, on a lot of the young dancers who are providing tremendous amount of output of performing online.
thank you for saying that, I really appreciate it, yeah,
For me, this was fantastic because when I come to the season to perform or something, I don't have the time to go and watch a lot of young dancers. And actually, what we should be doing when we talk about the future of Bharatanatyam is we should be watching young dancers. And I so often say that it is about the experience of just dancing, margams over and over again. I've danced
yeah,
thousands of margams before I've come to a space where I can renegotiate. So
yeah,
for me, it was amazing to see a young girl in Nagpur in her small bedroom performing a margam,
wasn't it
right?
beautiful,
It
yeah,
was stunning. And the beauty of social media is also that if you don't want to watch it, you don't have to watch it.
yeah,
So
exactly,
I
yeah,
was disappointed by some people who really had, really insensitivity, I would say, in terms of understanding people's context, because I was in a context as well with very limited space. I couldn't have
for
lighting
sure,
in the background and all this kind of stuff. And at the same time, were really not encouraging for young people to just go out and do it without any
Do it.
judgment,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
because that's where the experience builds,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. And,
So
and, and maybe don't you think this whole period has just been sort of a period of negotiation, right? We're all just negotiating like
constantly,
every day, right?
constantly, and still, because of course none of us
Yeah.
have a sense of really when, if
Freedom.
things will come to normal again, and or
Yeah.
you know, and you know, for example, with us, all our touring is cancelled for the whole year. So that means it's the first time in my life for a whole year that I've never
You're
been
going to.
on tour. I've not, you
Wow.
know, and that is a tremendous negotiation as just
Yeah,
as a
for
person,
sure.
just as a person.
Yeah.
And there's this element of, you know, after a point, how much can you just surrender to it? How much
Right.
can you just surrender to it? And for me, I
Yeah.
think what was the most complex part of it was, ironically, that when I am working towards a performance, when I'm working towards a kacheri, when I'm working towards a show, I am so rigorous about going to a place where I can find this element of surrender in my dance. And yet, when it came to a personal space, I
It
couldn't find
was,
it.
yeah, yeah,
And that in itself was a frustrating, highly complex negotiation for me. You know, I felt
yeah.
like I often said during some talk sessions, I felt like a hypocrite. I felt
Wow.
like a
I
hypocrite
mean,
because I
yeah.
preach about it all the time. Just be, just surrender. And I can do it. I can find it in my dancing, and I couldn't find it in my life.
Wow, that's really such an interesting point that you make. So I'm going to ask you, like, since you talked about, this particular idea, I was hoping to ask this later. One of the points that I made, maybe was about how, in a certain way, the whole idea of performing is associated with the quality of being productive,
Yeah.
and perhaps like being is sort of like, we don't see you sort of thing. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah. Well, you know, we are very kind of dictated by a very globalized culture, right? That determines what is success and what isn't,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
for
absolutely, you're
sure.
absolutely right. This idea of performing is being productive,
Yeah,
producing is being productive, right?
yeah.
And of course, when we talk about performance, we're really talking about construction. So let's even go back to this concept of identity. We get up in the morning and we start performing,
Right,
right? I mean,
right.
gender theorists will say that we perform our gender through the
Absolutely.
day, right?
Yeah.
So this idea of performance is very much about an accumulation of construction that is about showing,
Showing. Yeah.
constantly showing. And in
Yeah.
showing, what really is happening psychologically is validation,
For sure.
right? Where it's interesting for a dancer, I think, particularly for a classical dancer, is that we spend our whole training period really working towards showing,
Yeah.
executing, and getting validation for the
Yeah.
execution of something as
Yeah.
close to perfection as we can. So,
Correct.
how do we come to a place in our temperament as performers and for the audience, because the audience are also trained to do that subconsciously,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
That we can
Right.
come to a place that we can let go and just be. And so, you know, for me, what is very beautiful is, and that's why I always say there's this huge difference, I think, between a dancer and an artist. You know, and I
Yeah.
think I think a lot of people use the word artist quite freely,
Freely. Yeah.
you know, and equally people use the term classical quite freely,
Freely.
but they
Yeah.
are both
Absolutely.
extremely loaded, and they
Yeah. Yeah.
both
Layered. Yeah.
determine a huge amount of understanding of the values that sit within it, the philosophy that sits within this concept of classicism, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so where it's complex is, for me, you know, I remember a ballet teacher of mine saying something, and she was an amazing teacher. She was really an amazing coach, and she said something to me very beautiful, which was the ideal point in the space is when suddenly in a moment, right, the coming to the synthesis of all the perfection with all the flaws of who you are,
Wow.
so
Yeah.
that you come to a place where you're able to unravel this space where the body has worked to a point of absolute rigor into finding this sense of perfection, and at the same time, in that moment, you completely deconstruct everything, and you reveal. The being is about revealing
Yeah, yeah,
the
absolutely.
flaws,
Yeah. So the
right?
performing and the being sort of come together, right?
The
Yeah.
synthesis of it. So you
Synthesis of
never.
it. Yeah.
It's not. I don't think about. As you said, it's never black and white.
Yeah.
It's about the shades and the nuances. I always
Yeah.
talk about this when we talk about Ardhanari, when we talk about Shiva as half male and half woman. Choreographically, traditionally, one tends to fixate on the two binaries, the right and the
And
left.
the, yeah,
But actually, the interesting point is the point that sits
is
right in the middle, the merging
center.
that
Yeah.
is neither here nor there, the ambiguous
Yeah.
points, right?
Yeah.
And I think it is this ambiguity, the ambiguous point in that space, yeah, where that's the moment where that synthesis of both together, and they are always momentary, right? They are always
Right. Yeah.
momentary,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But
It's just, yeah.
it flickers. But that's
Yeah.
the point when you get, really, the word I will use is, um, a moment of transcendence.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't always happen, right, Mavin? It's
No,
like,
no,
yeah.
at all.
Right.
And I think that's where, if you ask, I'm in a fortunate position, aside from me being a dancer, but I'm also in a very fortunate position as a coach, that I work with this wonderful artists, whether it's Akram or some of these ballet dancers, and so what is it that we search for as artists? What
Yeah.
are we
That's seeking.
searching
Yeah.
for in a
Yeah.
performance?
Yeah.
I talk about it many times now when I'm working with dancers. It's okay, yes, get the experience of performing amalgam, get the experience of executing items, right? But eventually, within that, even if it is through the execution of 7 items, what are you searching for? What are you searching for? Because that is what makes the journey yours. That is what makes someone want to go and see you, because they want
Yeah.
to go and see what your search
You,
is.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
If not, it's
Yeah.
just you delivering pieces.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also that little sort of portion of your identity, right? In some sense.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's who are you? What do you have
Who
to
are
say?
you?
And of course, the
Yeah.
beauty is, of course, and classical work, I think, is particular with this, Akhila, because really in classical work, you don't really go to see choreography. You know what the choreography is. You don't go really to understand what the Tyagaraja Kriti is. We know what the Kriti is. We'd have heard it
Yeah.
thousands of times. Why do we
Yeah.
go? We go for interpretation.
Right.
I go to see Malavika do that particular Varnam because the day before I saw Leelaka do that Varnam. I want to see
Right.
the interpretation. And
Yeah.
interpretation is about the artistic voice.
Right. Yeah.
So what do you have to say about it?
Right.
That's always my
Yeah.
question. And of course, that your voice shifts, that the voice you have as a 16-year-old
Is
differs from the voice that you have as a 44-year-old, and they are both
right.
valid.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mevin, you made this point about, in Bharatanatyam, right? You talked about how training is almost always about seeing, being seen, and, you sort of always groomed to become a performer, so to
Mm.
speak. Would you think this is different in contemporary
Not
dance,
at
where
all.
the state of okay,
No, I think it's across the board. The art of dancing, actually, not even dancing, being on stage. It's
is,
a
yeah,
it's a whole kind of it's the word perform.
perform, yeah,
Perform.
yeah,
One of the things very interestingly that I've been working now with some of the dancers when I'm coaching is, for example, how do you come to a place, right, where you can be so instinctive and intuitive with, for example, the manner in which you look at the mridangis and you look back and things like this. For me, these are very, so how do you come to a place where it is intuition that is sophisticated and skilled? So you're not coming out with a formula,
right,
right? It is in the moment, but that in the moment action is still so layered with a sophistication.
right, yeah,
Yeah, it's complex, and
absolutely,
and it's
yeah,
complex, and this is where the beauty, I guess, for me in being able to transmit and to share is it's very beautiful. It's very I really have a huge love and pleasure in working with young dancers.
Right.
A huge
Right.
love and pleasure,
Yeah.
because it's, you know, I think sometimes what happens is the problem sometimes, particularly I would say with South Asian dancers, is we have learned to talk too much and not enough doing, you know. And
Right.
I was talking about this with someone the other day, and English as a language has become
Language.
problematic for me,
Yeah.
because through the sophistication of being able to articulate through English,
Right.
more and
Yeah.
more it has become about articulating here
Yeah. Here.
and not
Then.
enough
Okay.
doing and showing. So when we
Right.
talk about all these things, about passing on, about lineage, about Bani, about all,
Legacy.
how
Yeah.
much are we doing and how much are we just talking about it,
Right. Wow. Yeah.
you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe I want to talk to you about, in the context of a Bharatanatyam dancer,
Hmm.
what is being? What is that state of being?
So, you know, I think bhakti is the most complex state, bhakti and moksha, right?
Right.
And
Right.
again, you know, because we come from a philosophy that is highly developed, if you like, right? Again, it's the same thing. It's very easy to talk about bhakti. It's very easy to
Yeah.
talk about moksha. Um,
Right.
but how does one achieve it is a whole other, you know, it's
Yeah.
just coming
Ball
and
game
doing a
altogether.
Tyagaraja Kriti is not necessarily going to take your audience to a space that is transcendental. I mean, how many
Right.
times have I gone to see a performance that is absolutely beautifully executed, even the Abhinaya is beautiful, and I don't feel something,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
when we talk about bhakti, one has to, it's coming back to the sense of being, right? One has to come to a place where genuinely the ego is dropped, absolutely,
Right.
right? I can only share with you the way I've been approaching it. So I kind of, for now, I would not want to think that I have a fixed way of doing it. But for now, what I tend to do is I have basically a choreographic structure that enables me to slightly, hopefully find it, which is, I think of the performance space as a classical performer as this.
Right.
I come into the space. Basically, everyone wants to know that you can do what they need to do to tick the box that, okay, he's got it in terms of classical grammar,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Because it's about trust.
Yeah.
The relationship between performer and audience is all about
Audience
trust,
trust.
right?
Yeah.
So I
Sure.
go
Yeah.
in, I make sure I have a trikala tirmanam chati. I make sure that the padata hastas are done to the abhinaya. Then I make, you know, so I kind of ensure that I've gained their trust over a period of time
Yeah.
of
Just. Yeah.
execution.
Yeah.
Then usually 3/4 through the performance, I break something choreographically. And I
Yeah.
basically, Akhila, what I do is I create something within the choreography that forces my body to, that I'm never sure I can complete it.
Yeah.
So I do something, whether it's just repeating the adavu 100 times sometimes,
Right.
yeah, but that, you
Right.
know, to a point where I'm not sure whether I can sit anymore, I'm not sure whether my knees can go anymore. I really, and truly the only way I can keep going with it is literally many times to pray and just go,
Right.
oh my God, please let me finish this. And
Right.
somehow that act of surrender in that moment, because I don't have basically the stamina anymore,
Right.
I
Right.
don't have the physical authority anymore,
Yeah.
allows me to come to a place where I just have to surrender to the moment and just go, oh my God, please let me finish it.
Yeah.
And somehow
Yeah.
this lends itself to a particular dropping of ego, I would
Right.
say. So that's the kind
Right.
of structure that has been, I feel, helping me to find a space that reaches transcendence. I have an interesting story for you. I and
Yeah.
my family, we are strong Devi followers. We follow the Shaktism, and there
Right.
was once. So my family temple is a Kali temple, Mahakali temple,
Right.
and so once, and we have a priestess who unfortunately has passed
Okay.
away, Gauriamma. So she said to me,
Okay.
"You come after. It must have been after Navaratri, I think." She said, "You come and dance in the Sannidhi for Devi, for Amma." Okay. So I
Okay.
prepared a nice Shringara Lahari, right? I went, I
Right.
performed it very beautifully, very cleanly, everything. After she finished the Abhishekam, the Aarti, she turned down,
Aarti.
she laughed at me and she said, okay, you better come back tomorrow and dance again.
Huh.
So I said, oh, why? You know, I felt, and she said, Amma is not asking you to come and be beautiful in front of her. She wants you to break your knees and dance for her.
Wow.
So I had to come back
Wow.
and I did a piece where so it is this, and when you link that kind of, that's why I'm saying, if I really think for me, from a personal point of view, this concept of bhakti is the same thing I had done for Ranjit and Vichna actually. They have a piece
Right.
on Mahakali that I said,
Right.
which they dance in
Right.
academy. When I think for me of a concept like Devi, Shakti,
Right.
right?
Right.
There's a place when I have to let go of this classical aesthetic and grammar and really
Right.
understand what transcendence means on that, on
Means.
those terms,
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
those terms, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Really. And so that element of allowing the body to break out
Just
of its formalist mode.
right.
But I
Right.
can only do that if I have gained the trust of the audience before that.
Yeah. Before that. Yeah. Yeah.
Before
You
that.
know, maybe I heard one of the interviews where you talked about being alive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's so important for a dancer, like, you know, to be alive, whether you're performing or you're being alive to the music, being alive to your body. Like, talk to us about this,
Being alive to
what you
life.
just said. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I think you gain, or at least for me, has been an amazing kind of journey, is that your senses become constantly heightened and constantly working, right?
Right.
What I mean by that is, for example, when we talk, when we talk to dancers and we say something like, you need to make sure that you watch a lot of art
Yeah.
so that your dancing improves, or
Yeah.
go and listen to music. That's
Correct.
all fine. Everyone knows that. But how? That is the thing. We need to guide dancers how I can go and look at an Anish Kapoor installation. But how do
But
I
yeah,
look
how do I
and
look?
how do I
Yeah,
bring it back is a whole other area of skill,
absolutely.
right? The
And there
problem is,
aren't enough people teaching that, right, Mavin?
no,
Like,
people are too busy telling
yeah,
them to do it, but not telling them how to do it,
yeah,
right? So for
right.
me, this thing of being able to look at something, understanding its whatever that aesthetic is or that dynamic is, whether it's visual, whether it's audible,
Model.
whether it's
Okay.
sensory, right?
Yeah.
And having this mind, which is the same kind of mind you need on stage, that
Right.
can be immersive but can be objective.
Yeah, that's, yeah,
You have to
wow,
be
yeah.
immersive and objective
But objective at the same time.
at the
Yeah.
same time, because when you are immersive, that means you can really have the experiential quality of that moment,
Actual, yeah,
and at the same time you are being able to analyze it objectively to see what is it that is making it experiential for you,
right,
you know so I
right.
think that for me, this thing of, and really, and it's fortunate and unfortunate, because then what happens is everything in your life becomes this two-way stream.
Yeah. But you kind of get used to it after a point,
You
right?
do get used to it, and that's where when you then come into things like abhinaya, for me, abhinaya is one of the most beautiful genres of work,
Absolutely, yeah.
right? I remember I was quite young. I must have been really 18 or 19 when I already started to feel uncomfortable with this notion of playing Radha,
Okay.
acting as Radha,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
because it felt so dishonest for me, to
Right.
just try to play something, and particularly as a male as well, to kind of
To,
assume a kind of,
yeah,
yeah. And so
yeah.
for me, from very young age, I felt the need to, for example, take Radha, understand Radha's psychology, understand the text. Sahityam is the most
Mhm.
important. Understand the spine. I always say the spine of the raga is the most important, because it gives you
Wow.
the state that you need to be in. And then all those things, that it is not me playing Radha, but it is Radha coming out of me. That it is Radha's
Yeah.
voice coming out of my experiences, my lived experiences, which meant that my lived experiences have to be tangible for me.
Yeah.
you know,
Beautiful.
and they
Yeah.
have to come from a place that is lived, which means as much as immersive, and I am very immersive in my dance is my total life, but
Yeah.
equally there's a part of me that is almost rigorous in living life, not
Right.
as a separate entity at all,
Right.
not as a,
Yeah.
I'm dancing 9 to 5 and this is my
Right.
private time,
Right.
but so that this synthesis, again, this ambiguous dynamic between the personal and the
Yeah.
performative, if you like, is
Right.
constant. Is
Right. So,
constant.
so Mavin, in a sense, these two ideas that you talked about, immersive and objective, at the same time, are also applicable in the context of performing and being, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The perfect example I give you is if you listen to T.M. Krishna in Kacheri. It's the perfect
Absolutely.
example, the ability to objectively understand how to take something, but equally be
But
so immersive.
yeah,
Equally be
yeah,
so immersive. You see? And
yeah,
I think Carnatic music is a very good example of many times when we see singers executing.
yeah.
Executing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Mavin, I wanted to ask you about, uh, these, you talked about this time when you're a performer and you've had this moment when the synthesis happens. Can you share one example when this happened? You talked about your ballet teacher telling you about this synthesis of performing and being, that they come together. Could you
You know,
talk
it's
about?
it's funny because um, um, uh, there's something about age that I think that is very beautiful, and I sit in a very interesting place because as a Western dancer, I am at a stage where everyone expects me to retire, right? I'm in my 40s. And as an Indian classical dancer, I'm in a stage where I
Your,
feel like everything is just starting.
yeah,
So,
just prime. Yeah.
so it's a very interesting kind of constant
Right.
dichotomy. But
Dichotomy. Yeah.
but what I find is that, for example, just let's go back even like 5 years or even 8 years ago, I found that that point of being was often in a moment of tremendous physical I don't want to use the word virtuosity, but physical vigor that I could
Right.
lose myself.
Right.
As I've got older, it's become about stillness.
Stillness. Yeah.
It's become about the amount of volume that sits in being nothing,
Yeah.
in being nothing, and understanding that just the simplicity, I mean, simplicity is the most complex thing to find.
Oh, yeah.
It is the most
Minimalism and
complex.
simplicity.
It's the
Yeah,
most complex, and
for sure.
because we are what really you want to do is it's a bit like a Chinese painter. You want to
Right.
come to a point where Chinese painting is just one stroke,
Yeah.
and that one
That's it.
stroke is
It's just,
perfection in a subliminal way. It's not perfection in
oh,
a
yeah.
virtuosic way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as I've got older, for me, the crucial point has come to a place to find this point of stillness. But in order to find that point of stillness that is totally open, that is totally surrendered, that is totally vulnerable, one has to go through this, 200-meter run
Right.
that genuinely, you see, because one can't act out being still.
Right.
You can't
Right.
perform to be still.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to come, it's a state of being.
Right.
It's a state of being. So what then one has to do is intelligently, it's a bit like a kacheri again, intelligently understand how to navigate the journey of the performance so that one then is able to find that
Is able.
state at the end.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe you've talked also about the importance of open space, that you need, like open space for dancers. I want to talk to you
Open
about,
space here or
yeah,
yeah.
physical space here for like an artist to kind of create. I
Mhm.
heard one of your interviews where you talked about the need for open space to be able to like create. I want to talk to you about why that quality of, you spoke about this quality of nothingness, right?
Mhm.
Just yeah, why is that quality of nothingness important for artists to cultivate, to actually be able to create better?
Okay, one thing I have to be clear is it's very important for me not to assume that every artist wants to find that.
For sure. Yeah.
That
Okay.
is also important. That's my
Yeah.
particular journey, and that's my
Is.
particular desire. So even when I'm teaching, I'm very conscious of the fact, I always say to dancers, I'm sharing with you something that you
Yeah.
are absolutely okay. It's absolutely
To
okay for you to reject.
reject. Okay.
The point is, I'm sharing it with you so that you get a taster to see, is this something that I'm interested in?
Right.
You
Yeah.
know? So it's very, as I said, one doesn't assume that everyone is wanting to have that journey or wanting to find that space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for me, this sense of nothingness, this sense of just being, I guess it's about, um, uh, personally, for me, truly investing and exploring this personal desire to, when we talk about, again, it's what we talk about, when we talk about this point of Paramatma and Jivatma connecting, this point of absolute subliminal ecstasy, anandam, when we talk about
Right.
anandam,
Right.
just
Yeah.
doing this is not going to sort it. It's a state that we have to find
Yeah. Within. Yeah.
within. And for me also, this tremendous, beautiful possibility of the experiential.
Right.
You see, one has to want their audience to be
Right.
part of that experience as opposed
Right.
to be observers of your
Of
execution,
that. Yeah.
because an
Right.
audience can easily come and sit and watch very well. But if you really want them to be part of a journey with you, an experiential journey with you, then it's a whole other manner of working. So this thing of this blank space, this nothing space, for me allows, number one, for this experiential element to happen. Number two, it allows for the creative mind to then have space to unfold a kind of fluid, organic, moment by moment, you know, development
Yeah.
that comes from a place of
Yeah.
nothing.
Wow,
That
yeah.
comes from a place of nothing.
When I posted this, this poster, a lot of people talked about how this was their internal dilemma, and I suppose they were referring to this
The
particular
lockdown.
time, Maven. Yeah, lockdown, when social media is inundated with people performing, and we discussed that. What is your take, and how does a literally, like a very literal question about how does an artist like negotiate that state of, do I want to perform or do I want to just be?
Um, it's a hard one you're asking, because I think it's a very personal, it's
Of
a very
course.
personal thing. So for me, as I said, what has been interesting is I've not missed the stage, I've missed the theaters.
Right.
That's very
Yeah.
interesting, because
Yeah.
actually for me, all the things that I'm finding for more often than not happen in the rehearsal and not in the on stage,
Right. That's an interesting point.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're in that space that allows you to to go there. On stage
Yeah.
you have all these
To
other
be.
factors. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think what I would say is, it really depends on the individual in terms of what the stage means to them. What is it that they're missing about the stage, you know?
Okay. That's a very interesting point. Yeah.
And it's very hard but important to not be judgmental on people's
Decisions.
needs, people's
Yeah.
decisions, because someone can say
Yeah.
to me, the stage is the only place that fulfills my ego, and I
Yeah.
have to be in a space that is open enough to understand that,
Right.
because that also serves a particular kind of mental state,
Yeah.
and if I'm
Sure.
honest, as a young dancer, that's
Yeah.
absolutely where I was.
Yeah.
That's absolutely where
Absolutely.
I was as a young dancer in my 20s.
Yeah.
The stage served my
Was
ego.
yeah. Yeah.
I felt so beautiful on stage. I could
Right.
conquer all, you know. So I think it depends on the age experience, of course, depends what
Right.
stage is to them. And of course, it depends on really so many things, so many logistic things. What are the conditions that you're living in? As I said to you, I was living in a bedroom for 2 months.
Yeah.
So to be was very, very hard.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
yeah, it's a complex one, that one.
Right. And also this, this literal sort of thing, notion of, how if perform, like if indicators of success of a performance are, good reviews, and, maybe a good ticket sales, then the validation that one gets out of being, right, is, it's a very, very personal sort of validation. And I think one needs to kind of renegotiate that, like you rightly said, depending on what they're looking for, their relationship with the stage itself.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting, Akhila, for that because I have an interesting relationship with India, no, with Chennai, that I don't live there anymore. I've not lived there for most of my adult life, but I still am very connected to it. I still perform a lot in the season, and I have an audience that has seen me since I was 16 till now, and I have an audience of young dancers that follow me now. And for me, what has been interesting is that it has always been about understanding with great clarity in terms of what you're saying, in terms of what is the success from a performance, is, for me, it has been about very, very intelligently identifying who are the kind of audience that I know I want them to give me that feedback. Right? So, for me, it's very easy for critics to come and sit and say whatever they do, or be intelligent about it. If I read someone's writing, am I interested in what this critic has to say? Because many times I might not. And then another critic I might read and say, wow, I really like her mat. So this is the person that I want to invest in. And equally with dancers, when I go to see a performance, do I feel something? Really, do I feel something? And if I do feel something, this is a dancer that I want to mentor me in some way or to guide me. So that becomes, and I don't waste my time basically on trying to network with everyone, number one, and trying to please everyone, because it's a very specific dynamic, and you want to really understand who your audience is, who your mentors are, and that's where you place your commitment and your focus.
Right. Mavin, this is probably not part of the purview of our discussion, but I was really intrigued by this word that you use called coach. And and we heard this word mentoring, like mentor is like very, very often used. And we know teacher, of course, and then there's of course guru. But coach, I've heard this word coach in the context of fitness, but I haven't often heard it in the context of, like you have an emotional, in the artistic context. And I feel like, whatever you're saying, I think it would be great if, we have coaches in the world of dance as well. And how would you say a coach is different in that sense from a teacher?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. So, of course, I live my life very much as a ballet dancer as well. I would say my daily structure is really as a ballet dancer in terms of how I structure my day and how I work. So a ballet coach is quite a normal thing for us. Where a ballet coach is different from a teacher is that a ballet coach is someone who is really in constant negotiation and dialogue with the dancer. Not just in, of course, we have things about steps and technique and, line and how, and technicalities, but more than that, it's very much the person that the dancer relies on, who can give them feedback in terms of, is what they are working towards actually coming out?
Wow.
Because we can sit and say, I'm feeling this, I'm doing that, but is it coming out?
Is it really?
Is it really coming out? And so the coach really is someone who guides to pull it out, if you like. And also a coach is someone who is very individual. So it's really many times, for example, a dancer will ask for this particular person because they resonate with this particular coach. So I have dancers who only work with me because they feel there's a dynamic, and some dancers work with other coaches. So there's a very personal relationship. At the same time, I guess it doesn't have that same level of hierarchy that a teacher and student has.
That a teacher. Also trust, right?
Trust is sometimes, many times the dancer trusts the coach much more than the choreographer.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Because
it's almost like the relationship
because
is
of the
much
hierarchies.
more deep. But it's interesting because I feel that in Bharatanatyam, I kind of not by accident. Lakshman sir was very, very interesting. So I was with him, and as a male student, I had really a lot of time with him, right? Because it was not just in the rehearsal space, you know, I was always next to him, with him.
Yeah.
But by the time I was 17, I would say, he one day one of his senior students, Meena Raman, came and she spoke to something. She's never told me what he actually said, actually, but he said something about me, and she was my coach.
Right.
So he
Okay. Wow.
actually inculcated, I
This,
subconsciously, I don't think he would have done it with knowingly,
yeah,
but
calling it.
someone
Yeah.
to coach me.
Oh,
So, and
wow.
until today, when I dance in Chennai, Meena Akka comes and coaches me.
Oh, wow.
Still to
Okay.
today. Still to today. Yeah.
How lovely.
Yeah. For me,
Right.
it's very important. It's very important, this external eye that knows your, you know, as a coach, many times you know the body much better than the dancer itself.
Right. Maybe I'm also curious if the coach also sort of, by virtue of working with the dancer so closely and therefore forming a trust with the dancer, also sort of is able to coach the dancer even in terms of ideas like negotiating these states,
Absolutely.
right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Like
Absolutely.
almost like at an emotional level as well.
Absolutely. And you know, then also one has to remember that there's one thing that happens in the rehearsal space. It's a whole
Right.
other thing when you come into the theater. You know,
Right.
the theater space in itself is a collaboration.
Is, yeah.
And I'm not saying that it has to be fancy production and loads of lights and blah blah blah. But even standing on a old Mylapore Sabha stage with what
Right.
it is, if you really understand the space for what it is and don't just go on
Right.
stage and dance, there is a whole manner that you can incorporate that space in
Yeah.
itself into this
Right.
whole journey, you
Wow.
know.
Yeah.
So it's a total yeah, it's a real technique and a skill in terms of this understanding of theater, of the space of the theater, you know. For me, it's always so interesting that even, you know, when in Chennai, you know, the side lights are, I don't know, always like 100% much more intense than most of the light. So, but there is something for me, as I feel the intensity of the light, which makes me sweat in a particular way.
Wait.
It makes me sweat in a very specific way that is
Particular
only
way.
specific in Chennai. That instigates something different in the manner in
Wow.
which I
Perform.
explore. Yeah, I
Oh,
explore.
wow.
Heightened awareness.
Yeah.
Heightened
And
awareness.
obviously, maybe things like that also come with a great sense of like introspection, awareness, all of these, right?
Well, you know, you
And
never
therefore, it's
stop,
also like
no?
about being a lot to be able to,
Akila, you never stop. You never stop.
yeah,
This,
yeah,
you know, it's
yeah,
one of the things that has always been quite challenging for me in the West, actually, because in the West we are because there's such a strong infrastructure, right?
right,
Dancers are trained to think of dance as a job.
right,
So you dance from 9 to 5, and that's it.
yeah, yeah, wow,
And then you have your private life. So for me, it's always the space that has always made me feel very foreign when I work as a Western dancer here, because I
here,
don't, my brain is consistently immersed in
right,
dance. It's
wow,
consistent. Yeah, it's a very interesting. It's one of the places
yeah,
where I would say you really understand the cultural tension of East and West, and however much we want to say in our globalized world that there's no
that,
East and
yeah,
West, there are certain things that are
there's
very,
still
very
that are
tangible.
typical, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Right. Maybe I'm just going to open the floor for some
Sure.
questions. There's just a question. Okay, Sarvation says, Barney and lineage, how do you negotiate your history and traditions that it becomes a resource blessing as opposed to a burden? Where does the past live in you in this contemporary moment? Thank
Wow,
you once
loaded
again.
question, Sarveshan. See, we mustn't be scared of burdens.
Right.
Burdens are part of it. Responsibility is part of it, right?
Yeah.
It is part of it. And I would say really, when Sir passed away, I felt, I felt responsible,
That
burden.
there was, yeah.
Yeah, I do feel this huge amount of responsibility, and it affects totally how I dance daily, actually, not even when I have a performance and stuff like that. I also do think there's something about um, silent perseverance, right? The
Yeah.
beauty of silence, we're talking about nothingness just now, right?
Yeah.
The beauty of silence, this whole element of don't question, has a value to it. Now, don't question doesn't mean don't be intelligent,
Right.
right? Don't question
Yeah.
also doesn't mean don't question here.
Right.
Don't question means don't try to find the answer immediately,
Yeah.
right? The perseverance of committing to something without expecting that answer immediately eventually unravels something that clicks and makes sense in terms
Right.
of what Sarvation is asking about this past and how do you place it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would
Hmm.
say, and it's a very hard thing that I'm suggesting, and it's also something that I don't think everyone can do,
Yeah.
right? But it's something that I believe in very much. It's also luck.
Right.
It's also luck because the
Right.
destiny of guru and disciple, sometimes
Right.
it's I can't say that everyone would have had the same experience that I've had.
Right.
Yeah, so it's luck in terms of who what those two energies are as well.
Right. Um, just give me a second. There's a question from Kiran Mai. Do you as a coach get access to the emotional ups and downs of the coached, of the coachee? Does it ever get to you? Does it make you feel like you're putting up with a lot of drama in that case?
Absolutely. I say this all the time. If I want to take a dancer to an unknown place, because that's
Right?
where I want to take them, right? Emotionally,
Right.
I
Right.
have to be the person who also holds them.
Right.
That is
Yeah,
my responsibility.
absolutely.
That is my responsibility. If you want to take them to a place that is really going to force them to engage with a particular depth emotionally that can be heavy or dark, or you have to be the
Right.
person there to hold them.
And you have to kind of I mean, kind of like peel off the masks, right?
Totally,
In front of your coach as well. How else
totally,
will your,
totally.
right?
And again, I think it's one of those really interesting processes because you become so engaged emotionally, and
Right.
yet the necessity to have that disattachment and objectivity is the what
It's,
also
yeah,
makes it work.
right. So it's immersion and objectivity again.
Same thing. Yeah, yeah.
Same thing. Wow. Okay, so Kiran may say thank you. I am, yeah. I also think that a lot of dancers maybe have been battling this pressure of performance, even though some of them probably just, this was a question that came to the Aalaap DM as well.
Mm,
Like a lot of dancers talked about they actually don't want to perform, but
mm,
they're feeling pressure to perform
mm.
because of all the, clamor on social media, so to speak. How
Yeah.
does one sort of um, tune their minds to be able to just be and
You
not
know,
sort of succumb to this pressure?
I think there's also another element in terms of um, the beauty of studying. I think is so
Right.
important. And for me, as much as people, and as I've said, I've appreciated a lot of dancers who have really been putting an output, because I think it's beautiful to see dancers just dancing and having the
Yeah.
space, not having to deal with a sabah or a sabah secretary or anything, and just dancing, right? I think there's a really beauty in that, and it's given me the opportunity to watch dancers. I would really say to dancers equally, know yourself, know
Yeah.
yourself, and be convinced by yourself. It's so
Right.
important, this element of conviction. you
Conviction.
know
Yeah.
conviction, the
Yeah.
conviction to say, you know what, I
Right.
just want to study
Right.
now. Now is the
And it's
perfect time.
okay.
I have no kacheris, I just want to go and do class,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So it's that conviction, and also that conviction is what gives you the individualism, which is what is going to make you special in the first place.
Make you a, yeah, yeah, yeah.
You're not run of the
That,
mill in that sense.
right. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Just give me a second.
yeah.
Maybe I'm just scrolling through the questions. I may have missed a couple. I'm just going to make a note of them. Was a question because I had taken off the. Okay, that's fine. Just maybe I'm just going to ask you
Yes,
one.
sure.
Okay, there's a question. Okay, sorry. Due to coaching, would the dancer miss? Okay, so everybody's moved to the idea of coaching now. Due to coaching, would the dancer miss the full beauty of the journey? There's a fine line here. Can you add a point?
Yeah, it is tough. I think what she's asking is, when you have so much information, how do you come to a point where you can let go of the notes and
Yeah,
just immerse yourself?
and
And
just
that
kind of be.
and that takes time. That takes time. And that's also, what I always say, it's so important for dancers to understand is, there's one thing about, there is training and there is rehearsing. They are
Yeah,
two separate
they're
things.
not. Oh,
You
we use
train,
that word so loosely, right?
we use it so loosely. For me, training is your grammar, right? Your grammar. Rehearsing is when you are exploring your work. And what are you aiming to get out of the rehearsals is another thing. Are you just doing it because you need to go through the items? Is it just about the stamina? Is it just about the musician? What are you actually doing in the rehearsal, right? So
Right,
for me, the rehearsal is about the exploration, right?
right.
So how do you get to a place, the question that it can become a part of the journey is, the amount of rehearsals you do gives you the skill. It is the technique,
This,
the skill to
wow,
apply notes and at the same time release notes.
wow.
You know, for me, when we talk about technique, this is what I mean. It's technique is not just sitting in Aramandi and can you stretch your leg and can you
And
do that.
yeah,
Those are very simplistic things. But real technique is so much, again, the negotiation of the mind to be able to do. How can I absorb and release at the same time?
wow.
How can I perform and be?
Wow,
You know?
finally it's like it's amazing. I mean, we talked about these two as two exclusive ideas, but from what you're saying, maybe it seems like they have the possibility of sort of uh,
Coexistence.
coexistence and harmony, right? In
That is
synchronicity, so to speak,
exactly the word, that you placed, Akila. Harmony is the most difficult thing. You
to
see, we
achieve.
use these words so freely again.
I'm
But
using it so freely. I'm not even a dancer, Mavin, so I'm
harmony,
probably
that
just
moment, again, if you are working, and that's why I always say to musicians, dancers, please be very strict with your musicians. Don't allow this two rehearsal nonsense, right? To come to a place, where, for example, you are in a state, in a performance, and you're doing Mohamana Vanam something, or something like this, and the singer is able to take a sangadi, and you come to a point where the whole thing in that one note is harmonized.
it's yeah, beautiful.
It is goosebump. Yeah,
Yeah, really, it's that moment, right? Yeah,
that's moment, and that is what you want to achieve, and equally the humility when it goes, to let it go.
to let go. Yeah,
To let
beautiful.
it go
Yeah,
is important. Yeah.
yeah. Mavin, I want to tell you that everything you spoke, I'm sure it resonated so beautifully with dancers, but it also resonated so much with me. I'm not a dancer, but I feel like everything that you said is so applicable to life in general and to the way we live it. So thank you so much for,
My absolute pleasure. As I
yeah,
said,
I
I've become
thoroughly
quite a
enjoyed this
fan of yours.
discussion. Oh my God,
And
Krish,
I was really looking forward to this session with you, and because I
I
knew you would
appreciate
lead
that.
it beautifully as well.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be saving this conversation in our IGTV video, and we'll also put it up later on the website as well. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for,
Thanks so much, Akila.
yeah,
Stay well and stay safe.
fantastic. And thank you to everybody who joined and enriched the conversation. Thanks a lot. Good
Bye.
night. Stay safe. Bye-bye.